Hey everyone, Tony G with another hot take, and this one's about Ricky Gervais. If you haven't seen the video, many of you have to see Ricky hosting the Golden Globes. Don't watch the Golden Globes, I say. Watch the clips of Ricky and his jokes. They're amazing. They're very funny and very biting. He was savage, and he just tore through all the nonsense, and he really sort of saved comedy a little bit that night. Just like Dave Chappelle and a lot of these guys, he just didn't give a flying F about anything. He didn't care what people thought or said. He said, listen, I'm going to tell jokes, and I'm never going to host this thing again. It was great. The interesting thing about it is the reaction post-mortem, right? So the reaction has been from the press to poo-poo it and say, oh, how tiresome Ricky was. Meanwhile, everybody on social media is talking about it. They're showing the clip over and over again, how funny it was, how great it was, because, to be honest, people are sick of... I look at it this way. You know, people in Washington are out of touch, right? They live in these positions of power, and they're in a bubble, and they're just tone deaf as hell. You look at somebody like, 90% of them are tone deaf as hell. You look at somebody like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Mitt Romney. These people, they say and do things that indicate they don't have any connection to the average person whatsoever, and they just don't understand their problems, and they don't care. There are a lot of celebrities, not all celebrities, but a lot of celebrities who become that way over the years. They have so much money for so long, they just, they do everything in a shorthand. And the shorthand today for a lot of people is social media, right? So you don't have time to read the newspaper and read all these things, so you're on social media, and your friends are sharing stuff, and you see an article, and all your friends are horrified by it, so you have to be horrified too, and you just get caught up in the moment, and you say something stupid on social media. Celebrities are no different, except that they're famous, and when they tweet something or post something, everybody sees it because they're famous. And then suddenly it becomes a thing because this famous person said something. The Golden Globes and the Oscars and events like that were the equivalent of the internet for celebrities of their day. It was their moment to, be famous for themselves and not, whatever role they had taken on. So you got to actually see the person rather than the character. And they would often use this time back in the day to rally against political stuff. And it was very trendy, right? So coming out of like the 60s and 70s, you had Marlon Brando saying stuff about Native Americans, and that, when he said it back then, there were still a lot of conservatives in Hollywood. There were still people conservatives who watched things like the Oscars, and, when he said stuff like that, it was a little bit outrageous and weird, and it was still a time when like a streaker could be seen running around in the background of the Oscars. I think there was one like that, and it was a little more loose. So there was a little more sense of like there were actual people in this thing. It wasn't so controlled, and everything wasn't so orchestrated. So the fact that a guy like Brando would, spill out his political purse on the open stage was him. It was him being crazy. It wasn't like, although it was trendy, it wasn't that trendy that everybody was doing it. Then, over the years, it became more and more trendy to do, right? This is your moment where you're in front of millions and millions of people, so you have, this is your moment in front of the world, right? If you win an Oscar. So you got to say something super important. And some celebrities, they would resist that temptation. They would just say what a lot of us would say: oh, thank you for this award. I'd like to thank my agent, and I'd like to thank all the people involved with the movie. But other people who either won a bunch of times or, were just very full of themselves would take the opportunity to make political statements. And look, I'm not against people making political statements. Obviously, I make political statements all the time. The problem is when you're super famous, you should be very careful when you make pronouncements like that, because I look at it this way: it's a bit of a bait and switch. You're famous for being an entertainer, and you draw in all the viewers for being entertaining, and then the moment you're at your peak, rather than be entertaining, you decide to lecture me about climate change or whatever, Patricia Arquette. So it feels like a bit of a cheat, because, people want to see celebrities, but they also want to be entertained. I mean, most of these celebrities are known for being entertaining. And they kind of forget that they're not very entertaining when they're lecturing people. When Marlon Brando did it, it was so crazy. It was also entertaining in its own way. But now when celebrities do it, it's so old, it's so trite. It's not even the least bit entertaining. And rallying against Trump is really not entertaining, because literally everyone on the left side of politics is doing it. Nonstop, 24/7. We've seen it. Don't need to see any more of it. We have a glut of people blasting Trump all day long. Don't need to see the famous people get on board too. We get it. You're Democrats. You're liberal. We get it. So when Ricky Gervais comes out and finally skewers the left side of politics and the people who are elitist about it, it's so great, because most people in entertainment are afraid to do that. I'll give you an example that just breaks my heart. I think Stephen Colbert is like that now. Stephen Colbert was so brilliant in the press club dinner, the White House press club dinner with George W. Bush. And right in front of Bush, he skewered him. Absolute mastery, just went after Bush, hammer and tongs, in a great ironic piece that I still recommend to this day. But now he's sort of like so much the other way. It's sad. It's sad to me. He should be skewering the other side of politics too, because that's his job. That's his job, to skewer both sides. When you're making jokes and you leave out your side, you're kind of pulling your punches. And I think, this is what's hurt The Daily Show. It's not, Trevor Noah is a funny guy. I've seen his stand-up. He's pretty funny. But he can't be funny in the era of Trump, because all his audience wants are more Trump jokes, and we're sick of them. I ran out of Trump jokes in like 2016. There's not that much to do on the guy. He is who he is. We all get it. But meanwhile, there are these ridiculous celebrities and self-righteous, hypocritical people saying all these ridiculous things, and you're just giving them a pass. Ricky didn't give these people a pass. He nailed them to the wall, and he slapped them across the face, and he pissed on their shoes. And it was great. It was absolutely brilliant. Harvey Weinstein is a perfect example of a guy, an issue, whatever you want to call it, that people in Hollywood have only kind of sort of addressed, right? This was a guy who was super powerful. He had, and he did horrible things, in my view. Sounds that way. I can't say for sure because he hasn't been convicted yet. But certainly there's a lot of proof, and there's a lot of nastiness. And I hope he gets what he deserves. But at the same time, you have a lot of people in Hollywood that seem to be a little guilty, at the very least, of looking the other way. The ones that aren't ought to be lauded, and they're not. Seth MacFarlane made jokes about this way before it came out, and at least that was something. There are a lot of people they just look the other way. And where are they on their mea culpa? Where are they on their responsibility? If you can't be self-righteous and not and be sort of like one of the guys in Harvey's crew and not come out now. Now's the time to come out and say, you know what? I should have said something, but I was afraid. He had my career in the palm of his hands. He could still destroy me, but I have to speak out now or whatever. Or you don't get into the fray at all, and you just stay out of it because you say, well, I'm not political. So to get into the fray, you kind of got to be consistent in your principles and your politics. It's just like a politician. When a politician does this, people nail him to the wall. When a Republican spends too much money, or when a Democrat fails to protect marginalized people, the people in their base nail them. The problem with celebrities is they're very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable people socially, because if they pick the wrong political opinion, their career could be over. Bravery is when you go against the mainstream. Ricky is brave for doing this. Now, he's not all that brave in that he's got FU money. He's got deals. Like, he's not going to be broke. But, when people come out, when it's unpopular, like when the Dixie Chicks came out and made a statement against George W. Bush, that was pretty brave. Their audiences are pretty Republican. And for them to speak out, that was gutsy. Even when Michael Moore spoke out about George W. Bush. Now, that wasn't his audience, but George Bush was very popular at the time, and he got a lot of flack for it. But, look at him now. Michael Moore has proven, in my view, that he's just so partisan. Was it really about Bush? Was it really about what he did? Or was it just he was a Republican and, well, I'm against being Republican, so I'm going to say all sorts of things. You have to be consistent. If you want to wade into this political mire, you have to say, this is what I am, this is what I believe, and I'm going to consistently believe it. So, these celebrities who weighed in on Iran, I watch a lot of pundits online, and they do political stuff. Guys like Sargon of Akkad and Razor Fist and Sticks and Hammer 666. And these guys are pretty up on this stuff. And all of them said basically the same thing. Well, I'm going to wait, see, there's more details are coming out. I'm going to wait before I totally weigh in on this. Not someone like Rose McGowan, like she goes wading in, gets up on Twitter and goes wading in. That's not something someone with a brand should be doing. A celebrity brand, you're risking your whole celebrity brand on making some stupid political statement on Twitter where you don't know what the deal is. There's a lot of things coming out about the Iranian general. So I'll give you two things. Like, the first thing that came out, obviously, was all the terrorism he had committed over the years, right? So at first, people were like, oh, this is terrible. But you got Michael Moore and Rose McGowan basically apologizing. That's not the way to go when you're talking about an Iranian general who's committed what pretty much amounts to atrocities over the world. He's done some pretty bad things. Now, some of it has been exaggerated in the press. The saying that he killed 600 soldiers, I'm getting from some of my sources, that may not be totally true. That may be a bit of propaganda coming out of the Dick Cheney era, and that may be an exaggeration. However, it's clear the guy has been working with terrorist groups. He's definitely responsible for killing a lot of people, including Iranian protesters in his own country. So he is not a good guy at all. He is a terrorist. But that isn't to say a guy like me, a libertarian, can't say, well, I'm not sad that that guy's dead, but I am sad that you would take someone out that way, because I am very much against the drone program as it stands now. But then another piece of information came out that he may have actually been on his way to a peace initiative with the Saudis and may have been delivering a message from the Iranian government to the Saudis regarding some sort of peace arrangement. Now, whether or not that's true, who knows? But you can see how complicated the Middle East is. So to blow your load on Twitter about it just seems unwise, especially when you're famous and you're scrutinized more than other people. So, you either want to say something vague and reassuring, like, geez, I don't think we should drone bomb people, or, or gee, I hope we don't go to war, or you want to, not say anything at all, like, well, I don't really make a lot of political statements. I'm just an actor doing my thing, and, I don't really feel it's my place to do that. That to me holds more weight, unless you're an actor who has actually been in politics. Clint Eastwood was the mayor of, I forget what town, so he might have an opinion, and I'm sure he does. And he's also been around a long time. So Ronald Reagan, of course, was an actor and a president, and if he was still around and not senile, he might have an opinion. But, overall, this is about the hypocrisy of Hollywood. And it's the height of hypocrisy to talk about events and use your fame to kind of flack your political opinions when you really only use them to further your career, right? It's very popular to bash Trump, and it's very woke to bash Trump, but in some circles that's just alienating your audience. So anyhow, and you look at a guy like Ricky Gervais, he couldn't be more liberal. He's a liberal guy, but he's doing what he does best. He's being funny. He's being acerbic and witty. And hey, no one likes to be the butt of jokes, but they're funny. They're funny if someone's the butt of jokes. And when you're a public person, you have to expect that. So for all these people complaining about it through their various media people, you really ought to just get a sense of humor, because Ricky Gervais just absolutely killed it at the Golden Globes. So please, if you haven't seen it, Google Ricky Gervais Golden Globes opening monologue, and I think you'll be pretty amazed.